She signed the divorce papers with shaking hands, tore up the pregnancy test meant to change his mind, and walked out of his life in tears. 5 years later, she returned. He was shocked at what she had become. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The morning sun filtered weakly through the half-drawn curtains, casting long shadows across the silent bedroom. The room, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt like a cold museum of memories. Every photo frame on the wall, every souvenir on the shelf, seemed to mock her with echoes of a life she thought was permanent. Maya sat on the edge of their king-sized bed, her spine rigid, but her shoulders slumped under the weight of disbelief. Her fingers clenched around 2 items, a manila envelope containing freshly signed divorce papers, and a small white stick with 2 faint pink lines. A positive pregnancy test. She hadn't meant to tell him today. Not like this. She was going to wait, maybe cook dinner, light candles, share the news with a little sparkle in her eyes and a trembling voice of joy. But instead, life twisted cruelly, yanking the moment from her. Daniel stood across the room, back turned, already buttoning the cuffs of his shirt like he was late for a meeting. His voice was flat, detached, the voice of someone who had rehearsed what he had to say, but not the pain it might cause. I've made up my mind, Maya. I'm sorry if it seems sudden, but I think this is best for both of us. She stared at him, her breath caught in her throat. Best for both of us? You're ending our marriage like it's a bad contract. He turned, his face unreadable. I'm not happy. Haven't been for a while. I met someone. I didn't mean for it to happen, but I'm in love with her. The words sliced clean through her, no warning, no anesthesia. Just pain, sharp, immediate, and total. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. No words. No cries. Just air, shaky and useless. For a moment, she forgot how to breathe. You met someone, she repeated, her voice hoarse. And your solution was to erase everything we built? Daniel looked away. Dragging this out will only make it worse. She rose slowly, unsteadily, the pregnancy test still clenched in her fist. You don't even know what I came to tell you today, she whispered. What? He asked, almost absently. She looked at him, and in that moment something broke, not just her heart, but the very foundation of who she thought she was in his life. All the years, the support, the quiet sacrifices, the nights she stayed up comforting him through failures, believing that their love was worth every storm. Maya opened her palm, showing him the test. He blinked, then frowned. What is that? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The 2 pink lines were clear. Daniel didn't say a word. No joy. No shock. No regret. Just silence. That was the moment she realized he had already emotionally left her long before this conversation began. Her fingers trembled as she looked down at the test. A sob crawled up her throat, but she refused to let it free. With a sudden, fierce motion, she tore the test in 2, the broken plastic snapping like a fragile bone. The pieces fell to the hardwood floor with a sound that echoed louder than it should have. She walked past him, brushing his shoulder as she moved toward the door, her heels echoing with finality. At the threshold, she stopped and turned back for just a second, not to plead, not to fight, but to remember. And then she was gone. The door closed softly behind her, but to Maya, it sounded like a coffin lid sealing shut. Outside, the October wind stung her cheeks as she stepped into the morning light, tears cascading down her face. She had nothing with her except a broken heart and a hollow womb. But somewhere deep inside, in the place where pain and purpose are born, something stirred. The apartment was barely more than a box, peeling walls, a flickering overhead light, and a small window that offered a view of nothing but a cracked brick wall. A single mattress lay on the floor unmade. No curtains, no decorations, just silence. The kind of silence that swallows you whole. Maya sat cross-legged on the mattress, her body wrapped in a thin shawl that couldn't keep out the cold, her face angled toward the single-space heater working overtime in the corner. Her eyes were fixed on the wall, unmoving, as if her mind had fled far beyond this room, to a life that no longer existed. It had been 3 weeks since she'd left Daniel. 3 weeks since the miscarriage. She hadn't told anyone. Not a friend. Not her family. She let the hospital discharge papers sit, unopened, in the bottom drawer of the dresser she'd picked up from the thrift store down the street. Her body had healed faster than her soul. The physical pain dulled by ibuprofen, but the ache in her chest, that was something medicine couldn't touch. Maya had never thought she'd end up here. Alone, jobless, forgotten. She remembered sitting in the bathroom of a gas station 2 days after leaving him, pressing a blood-stained tissue to her leg and whispering to herself, "Don't cry. Not here. Not now." She didn't cry then. But now she cried. Silently. Without sound. Just tears that slipped down her face as if they'd forgotten how to ask permission. Then one evening something shifted. It was a small thing, barely noticeable. She was scrolling on her cracked phone, not looking for hope, just passing time, when she stumbled across a video titled, "Start Where You Are." It was a grainy, low-quality video of a woman giving a TED-style talk in a library basement. She spoke about rebuilding, about digging yourself out of failure, about becoming someone your past wouldn't even recognize. Maya didn't sleep that night. She opened her laptop, the one she hadn't touched since leaving, and began typing. Searching. Learning. There were free courses. E-books. Forums full of people rising from worse. She watched business tutorials while reheating noodles. She took notes on marketing strategies while wrapped in a blanket. She started volunteering at a local co-working space just to be near people building things. Each day, she gave herself a goal. Small at first. Watch one course video. Update your LinkedIn. Apply for one freelance job. Her first client was a nightmare. A demanding man who paid her less than minimum wage for hours of brand consulting. But she delivered with excellence anyway, because she knew someone else might see her work. And they did. From there, her name began to circulate, slowly, quietly. She didn't have a fancy office or seed money. But what she had was hunger, fire, and clarity born from pain. She read contracts at 2 a.m., took meetings over cheap coffee, and learned to decode financial statements like they were maps out of the pit she'd been thrown into. Soon, she stopped counting the days since she left Daniel. She stopped looking at the past as a wound and started seeing it as a furnace, one that had burned away her illusions and left only steel. And one day, while updating her calendar, she realized a full year had passed. No more mattress on the floor. She had a desk now, a bank account that didn't cry every time she opened it, a small team, a website. Her name, Maya Cooper, was beginning to mean something. And though she never said it out loud, every success felt like a quiet conversation with the version of herself that had walked away from that house. Tears on her face, pregnancy test in her hand. You are not done. You are not broken. You are becoming. The glass doors of Westbridge Holdings stood as tall and polished as ever, a symbol of the empire Daniel once proudly called his. The logo had changed slightly over the years, the edges sharper, sleeker. But the foundation was the same. Cold, ruthless, built on charm, intelligence, and calculated ambition. Maya stood just outside, the sharp click of her heels muted by the imported marble floors as she entered the lobby. She wore black, not out of mourning but power. A tailored suit, heels that made her taller than most of the men in the room, and an expression carved from silence. Not anger, not pride, just stillness. The kind that makes people nervous. A young receptionist looked up. "Name, please?" Maya didn't answer immediately. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a silver badge. Shareholder ID, priority level access, Maya Cooper. The receptionist blinked, startled. He checked the screen again. Her name was there, but the title beneath it shocked him. Majority shareholder, Westbridge Holdings. He stood up so quickly he knocked over his coffee. "Apologies, Miss Cooper. Please, the boardroom is waiting for you." Maya nodded once, then walk through the familiar corridors, ones she used to visit to bring Daniel lunch or sit quietly during his long meetings, offering support that no one else noticed. Back then, she was invisible to this building, a shadow behind the man in charge. Now, the air around her shifted as she moved. Staff whispered. Assistants stood straighter. Even the elevator doors seemed to open a little faster, as if the building itself knew who she had become. At the top floor, the elevator opened into the private executive suite. The boardroom doors were already open. Inside, men in suits lined the oval table, murmuring amongst themselves. The air was tense. The company had been bleeding money for over a year, bad acquisitions, failed tech rollouts, and rumors of internal mismanagement. Daniel had managed to keep it together with smoke and mirrors, but the board was tired of illusion. All heads turned as Maya entered. Daniel was at the head of the table, standing, arms folded mid-sentence. The words died on his lips as he saw her. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the city skyline outside the glass walls seemed to pause. She walked to the empty chair at the opposite end of the table. The chair meant for the shareholder who held the most weight. She pulled it out, sat down, crossed her legs, and opened a leather folder. Her voice was calm but precise. "Gentlemen, I assume we're ready to begin." Daniel cleared his throat, masking his discomfort. "Maya, I wasn't expecting." "You should have," she replied without looking up. "Your board approved the purchase 3 weeks ago. I now own 53.2% of Westbridge Holdings." A stunned silence followed. Even the CFO's pen slipped from his hand and rolled across the table. Daniel blinked, searching her face for some sign of play, sarcasm, a joke, some leftover affection he might appeal to. But what he saw instead chilled him. Distance. Control. Poise. The woman before him wasn't the one who had signed the divorce papers in tears. This woman had risen from ash with skin of iron and a spine of flame. "How did you?" he started. "I bought out your 3 largest competitors," she said, finally meeting his eyes. "Then leveraged them to acquire your debt when you went public with the expansion. Once your stocks dipped, and they did after that failed merger in April, I swept up the rest." She let that sit. "I've been watching for a while." Daniel stared at her, a flush of color rising to his neck. "Why?" "Business," Maya said simply. But beneath that single word lived 1,000 unspoken truths. She had come not for revenge, that would have been too easy, but for position, for power, for the seat that had once ignored her existence. "Going forward," she continued, her voice crisp, "all major decisions must be reviewed and approved by the board. And since I am the board now, I will be restructuring this company from the ground up." Daniel's fists tightened beneath the table. His empire, once unshakable, now rested in the hands of the woman he discarded like a chapter he thought he'd closed. He opened his mouth to speak again, but Maya was already standing. "I've booked a follow-up meeting for Thursday. Until then, I suggest reviewing the new policy proposals. And Daniel," she paused at the doorway without turning back, "your executive assistant will no longer report directly to you. You'll need to submit your requests through my office." And then she was gone, leaving behind a silence too thick to breathe. The executive suite on the 37th floor had always been Daniel's kingdom, all glass, chrome, and masculine grandeur. A room built for control, for dominance. Every detail, from the leather chairs to the private minibar stocked with aged whiskey, whispered wealth and ego. But it felt smaller now. He sat at his desk, staring at the screen of his laptop, though he hadn't processed a single word in the last 20 minutes. His tie was loosened, his collar open. Papers were scattered across the mahogany desk, some signed, some not. His once steady hands now fidgeted with a pen, tapping out an uneven rhythm. She hadn't just returned. She had arrived, with power, precision, and silence more cutting than any raised voice. And Daniel was beginning to realize something he had never once considered. He needed her. Not emotionally, not romantically, but professionally, critically. Because without Maya, his company would collapse. His phone buzzed. From Maya Cooper's office. Subject: Executive Structure and Departmental Realignment. Please review the attached documents. Your approval is not required, only your acknowledgement. He laughed under his breath. Cold, bitter, dry. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It wasn't her. It was Caleb, his COO, who stepped inside carefully, like a man entering a lion's den. Just came from the operations meeting, he said. Maya's changes are aggressive, but efficient. HR's already restructuring senior management. She's cutting bloat, reorganizing tech, bringing in outside consultants from her firm. Daniel didn't respond. She knows what she's doing, Caleb added after a beat. Daniel turned his chair slowly. She always did. I just didn't see it. Caleb hesitated, sensing the weight behind those words. Then, with a respectful nod, he left. The door clicked shut. Daniel leaned back, eyes drifting to the skyline. He thought of the early days with Maya, back when they were young and poor, when she would sit cross-legged on their kitchen floor reading business books out loud while he worked on pitch decks. She had been his sounding board, his silent strategist. She never asked for credit. She believed in his vision more than he did. And he had thrown her away like a miscalculation. He hadn't thought about the pregnancy test since that day. He told himself he didn't look closely. He told himself it didn't matter. That the divorce was necessary. That love had expired. But now she was the storm. 2 days later, Daniel received a formal invitation. A private strategy session with the new controlling shareholder, Maya Cooper. The meeting was set for 9 a.m. sharp. He arrived at 8:45. Her office was larger than his used to be, reconfigured from the executive lounge and the adjoining boardroom. The decor was modern, minimalist, and commanding. Black stone, white walls, one large abstract painting, and a massive desk of dark wood with steel legs. Behind her, the floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the room with pale light, casting long shadows. She didn't look up as he entered. She was writing something, pen scratching slowly against thick ivory paper. When she finally did glance up, her expression was unreadable. "Daniel," she said, her voice level. "Have a seat." He obeyed. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was deliberate. Weighted. She let it sit between them like a judge. "I wanted to talk to you," he said finally, voice low. She tilted her head slightly, listening but not yielding. I've been thinking," he continued. "About everything. About the past. About how I handled it." Maya didn't blink. "I was selfish. I know that now. I convinced myself I was chasing happiness, but really, I was running from discomfort. From intimacy. From you." She didn't interrupt. Her stillness was more damning than any outburst could have been. "And the pregnancy," he added, his voice breaking slightly. "That test. I didn't even ask. I didn't let myself ask." "No, you didn't," Maya replied, her voice calm but sharp. "You wanted a clean exit, not complications." Daniel nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." "Are you sorry for what you did?" she asked softly. "Or for what it cost you?" He hesitated. Maya leaned back in her chair. "You want forgiveness. I know that. But I'm not sure you understand what it means to ask for it." Daniel leaned forward. "I miss you, Maya. I miss what we had. And seeing you now, seeing what you've built, I realize I didn't just leave a marriage. I left a partner. The better half of me." She studied him. Not with anger. Not with love. With clarity. "Do you love me now, Daniel?" she asked. He swallowed. "Yes." "No," she said gently. "You love the idea of me. You love the version of me that won. The version you think can fix what you broke. But the woman I was when I loved you, she died when I signed those papers and tore up that test." Silence. "I don't hate you," Maya said after a long pause. "But I won't go back to who I was for you. That woman begged you to see her. This one doesn't need you to." Daniel bowed his head. And just like that, the power he once wielded, the charisma, the presence, the charm, all of it evaporated under the weight of her truth. He was a man disarmed, not by cruelty, but by growth he couldn't stop. Maya stood, gathering her folder. Our professional relationship continues, she said, walking toward the door. You will remain on as a consultant, under review. Your shares are now subordinate to mine. You'll report to Caleb. Not to me. Daniel looked up, hollow. That's it. That's mercy, Maya said, opening the door. Good morning, Daniel. And with that, she walked out. Not in pain. Not in revenge. But in full command of a world that once refused her voice. The apartment was quiet, not the cold, unfamiliar quiet that once haunted Maya's early days of loneliness, but a peaceful kind. The kind earned after war. The kind that comes when the world outside is still, and the battle within has already been fought and survived. It was late. City lights blinked against her window, casting golden reflections across her minimalist living room. She sat on a cream-colored couch, barefoot, legs tucked beneath her. A cup of untouched tea rested on the coffee table, long since gone cold. She stared at the small wooden box in her hands, old, worn at the edges, and lighter than she remembered. She hadn't opened it in years. Not since she moved into this place. Not since she told herself she'd close the chapter for good. But tonight, after facing Daniel, after hearing his apology, after watching the man she once loved sit in silence while she dismantled everything he thought was untouchable, something inside her had stirred. Not longing, not pity, something else, something harder to name. She opened the box slowly, like lifting the lid of a memory she wasn't sure she was ready to see. Inside were only 3 things. The torn pieces of the pregnancy test, wrapped in a faded tissue. A photograph, her and Daniel at the beach, 3 summers before the divorce. She was laughing, head thrown back, sunglasses sliding down her nose. He was beside her, shirt half open, arms around her waist. They looked careless. In love. Almost young enough to believe that love was enough. And beneath the photo, folded once down the middle, was the letter she'd never sent. She unfolded it, smoothing out the crease. Her handwriting stared back at her, raw, rushed, uneven. She had written it the night she miscarried, in that tiny apartment with no heat. She didn't remember what it said exactly, but now, reading it again, every word hit like a stone to the chest. You didn't ask. You didn't even look. I was going to tell you. I swear I was. I thought maybe the baby would change something. Maybe you'd remember who we used to be. Maybe you'd see me again. But you didn't ask. So I didn't tell you. And maybe that's my fault too, for believing I ever mattered more than your pride. Maya let the letter fall gently to the couch. She leaned back, exhaling slowly, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. She didn't feel anger anymore. Not like before. It had burned through her, then out of her, leaving only understanding, bitter but clean. Daniel's apology wasn't what moved her. It was his regret. Because now she saw what he hadn't. She was never weak. She had been loyal, present, whole. He had mistaken her tenderness for fragility, her quiet for invisibility. And by the time he realized the weight of what he lost, she had already carried it through fire, ash, and into an empire of her own. She stood, carrying the box with her. In the kitchen, she lit a small candle, its flame flickering soft and warm against the marble countertop. One by one, she laid the contents of the box beside it. The test, the photo, the letter. Then she opened a drawer and took out a lighter. She hesitated only once, her fingers hovering over the edge of the photo, before she let the flame catch. The tissue curled first, then the letter, the photo last. As the edges browned and turned to smoke, she felt no sorrow, only release. She watched until nothing remained but ash. And when it was done, she ran water over the sink and washed it all away. Later that night, she stood on her balcony, city breeze brushing against her face. Her eyes were dry. Her heart was full, not with revenge or satisfaction, but with peace. Peace in knowing she didn't need him to break to feel whole. Peace in knowing she had grieved completely. Peace in knowing she had become someone even she wouldn't have recognized 5 years ago. The past was not a chain around her ankle anymore. It was just a distant echo, and she had learned not to turn back when it called. The press conference was held at the Grand Meridian Hotel, an opulent venue reserved for high-stake announcements, industry-shaking deals, and rare moments when silence gives way to declaration. The ballroom had been transformed into a sleek, modern stage. A large black backdrop bore the gold emblem of Westbridge Holdings. Dozens of journalists from across the country filled the seats. Cameras flashed. The air was electric, humming with curiosity and anticipation. Maya stood behind the podium in a white suit, stark, immaculate, and commanding. A subtle gold pin glittered at her lapel, a phoenix, wings raised. Her hair was pulled back. Her voice, when she spoke, was even and resolute, clear not only in tone, but in who she had become. "Good morning," she began. "5 years ago, I walked away from a life that no longer served me, with nothing but my name, my will, and a truth I refused to let the world bury. Today, I stand before you as the majority shareholder of the very company that once overlooked me." A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd. Maya's eyes didn't waver. "I didn't come back for revenge. I came back for impact, to reshape what was broken, to reclaim the dignity of all those told they were not enough." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "I've achieved what I set out to do. The company is now solvent, leaner, more ethical, and more diverse than ever. But this is not my final victory. It's only my foundation." She looked directly into the crowd. Her next words felt like an earthquake spoken in calm. "Effective immediately, I am stepping down as majority shareholder and transferring my ownership into a trust, the RISE Initiative, dedicated to funding women-led startups, trauma recovery programs, and leadership education for young girls from underserved communities." The room broke into applause, but Maya didn't smile. She didn't need the applause. She wasn't performing. She was declaring legacy. "I will not be staying in this city. There are other battles, other voices that need lifting. This was one chapter. It ends today." Later that evening, after the cameras had shut off and the board members had shaken her hand with forced warmth and reluctant admiration, Maya slipped away from the crowd and walked the long corridor to the executive lounge one last time. Daniel was already there. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets, watching the city he once ruled and now only occupied. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "You always did know how to make an exit," he said quietly. Maya leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "And you always knew how to ruin a good thing." He nodded once, not defensively, not bitterly. Just honestly. "I wanted to say thank you," he said, "for not destroying me when you could have." She shrugged. "Mercy isn't weakness, Daniel. It's discipline." He looked at her, this woman he once dismissed, who had become something beyond his reach, not just powerful but untouchable. Not because of what she had, but because of who she had become. "I still love you," he said. The words came out small, fractured. Maya's gaze softened just a little. "No, Daniel," she said. "You love the version of me that stayed. The one that waited. The one that believed love would be enough." He looked down. "I don't hate you," she added gently. "I've moved through the pain. I've cried and raged and built and healed. And now, I've let it go." She stepped forward and placed a single envelope on the table beside him. He looked at it, then up at her. "What is it?" "Closure," she said. "Read it. Or don't. Either way, it's the last thing I'll ever give you." He nodded again, unable to speak. Maya turned and walked out. No tears, no anger, no glances over her shoulder. Just grace. Outside, the wind brushed against her skin as she stepped into the waiting car. The driver held the door for her. "Where to, ma'am?" She smiled faintly, gazing out at the skyline one last time. The buildings, the legacy, the city that once knew her name as a whisper. "Airport," she said. As the car pulled away, Maya leaned her head against the window. There was no music, no dramatic soundtrack, just the quiet rhythm of the road beneath her and the heartbeat of a woman who had once been broken, now reborn. No longer the wife. No longer the woman who cried as she signed the divorce papers. Not even the empire builder who brought a man to his knees. She was Maya Cooper. Whole. Free. And finally home within herself. We have come to the end of the story, I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.